से whole बन जाए, हाँ, तत्व कॉन्शियस वे ऑफ लिविंग ऑफ लाइफ। वो तो तभी होएगा जब सब चीज़ें कनेक्ट करेंगे हम। By blindly adopting this modern fragmented approach, what are we doing? We are producing robotic performance. Results तो दिख रहे हैं जो हमें चाहिए, लेकिन रोबोटिज्म आ रही है, नॉट रेजिलियंट बिलीवर्स नहीं बना रहे। The truth is कि आपका स्टेट, आपका गवर्नमेंट, आपके एजुकेशन इंस्टीट्यूशंस will not save your children. You have put immense trust in these organizations, but they will not save your children. The media is actively corrupting them. If we do not step up as guardians, मुझे बताएं कौन खड़ा होगा? हम नहीं खड़े होंगे तो कौन खड़ा होगा इनके लिए? हमारे दिल नहीं टलते। Today we will learn the science of how a child's brain is actually built from birth to becoming an adult, and what it needs at each stage, and your role in making that happen. By knowing the science, but knowing the science is only half the battle. Knowledge तो आ जाएगी, Sister Farhana हमें दे देंगी, but that's only half the battle. As an ummah, we fail at application. We get the knowledge, but we cannot apply it. Why? क्यों नहीं apply करते? What is the reason? Knowledge, इतने सारे videos and podcasts, everything's on there. We are getting a lot of knowledge. How come we are failing in application? Because our own mindsets suffer from cultural brainwashing. You know, एक false tag के ऊपर आप truth डालेंगे, वो नहीं जाता, नीचे ही नहीं जा सकता, उसकी root में false बैठा हुआ है, right? So it's essential कि वो उसको हटाया जाए. So the mind suffers from cultural brainwashing and sometimes lacks critical thinking. You cannot raise children correctly then if you yourself are trapped in old beliefs. This is exactly why the Find Your Truth training platform exists. You have to unlearn करना पड़ेगा cultural conditioning to empower yourself. You have to build your own character first. बच्चे को आप नहीं सही कर सकते जब तक आप खुद को सही नहीं कर लेंगे, because you cannot pour from an empty cup. पहले खुद को सही करें, then you can help your children. So इसके लिए हमारा Find Your Truth training platform है, and it helps you revive yourself towards your fitra, inshallah. फिर दूसरी बात आती है कि you alone doing it will not resolve the issue. आप अपने को भी सही कर लें, अपने फैमिली में बच्चों को सही कर लें, शौहर को सही कर लें, इससे भी काम नहीं चलता. क्यों नहीं चलता? क्योंकि बाहर का तो इन्फ्लुएंस आ रहा है. अब तो किसी घर में you can't stop it through the internet. All the influences are coming in. And Islam is built on community. It's not built on एक छोटा सा family. Family का purpose ही ये है कि contribute करें to the community. Yet we have become dangerously isolated in our individual homes. And that is why we have the Find Your Truth Masjid Leader project. And it is the cornerstone of Ummah's revival. इसको emphasis दे रही हूँ because we need not only you performing at optimum level, but we need the masjids as the root center of our lives to perform at the prophetic standards. A masjid cannot just be a prayer hall. It must be the fortress that protects our families. It has to be the living center where we raise our youth as one body. एक unit की तरह हम उनको बड़ा करें. Please join this masjid project and play your part. Today we are honored to have Dr. Farhana Kotal-Ann with us. Sister Farhana is not just speaking from theory. As a dedicated practicing medical doctor with extensive fraternal experience, she sees the reality of our physical and psychological health every single day. What makes her approach so vital for our community is how she bridges the gap between modern science and our deen. She brings a holistic vision that teaches us how to nurture our children. This is in perfect alignment with both the science of neurology and the fitra Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has gifted us. She will be presenting The Growing Child, an age by age guide to nurturing your child's brain. Dr. Farhana, you're very welcome to start. The floor is yours.
Jazakallah khair, Sister Faida, and welcome everyone on this platform of VOTP. And inshallah, today's topic is so huge. It's so huge. May Allah Subhanahu wa Taala give clarity in my words. May Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, help you understand it with the right, perspective, within the framework of Islam. And may Allah Subhanahu wa Taala help us apply what we learn, for the betterment of the Ummah. So that with that, Dua, let's go ahead and get started. There's a lot of ground to cover, and inshallah, I think this is going to be a multi-part series. So Subhanallah, we're going to understand the human brain today, and the important catchphrase is just love them smarter. Ikra is the first word which Allah Subhanahu wa Taala revealed, and we have to learn. We have to learn to be able to do a better job. Okay. So Subhanallah, myself, I'm a mom of three, so have seen the kids at a very, very close, with very close quarters. Alhamdulillah, now they are in the teenage, and one of them is 21 years old. So I've gone through the entire the phases of all the child's growth, and inshallah, so that actually has helped me a lot, and I've understood a lot while preparing this material, and I wish I had this information before I became pregnant. So that was a wish, and yeah, Subhanallah, please forward these sessions to anyone, any teens, any couples who are getting married and going to be having kids, because I think this is very, very valuable. So as Muslims, and the our lens of looking at everything in the universe is through the lens which is prescribed by Islam, because of course Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is the creator of the entire universe, and Allah knows the ins and out and each and every detail of the entire universe, and so He gives the best view possible. And tarbiyah is such an important role. It's such an important role in Islam. It's the event of a mom becoming pregnant is such a huge event in the life of any of us human beings. We are welcoming a ruh, the Allah's creation, into this world, which is a test platform for the humans. And are we prepared for it? That is the big question, which I have for each and every one of you. I mean, have you even reflected at this enormity of this responsibility? Do we feel confident about having all the knowledge? That's one. Have we prepared ourselves to be able to do this in the best possible way? So these are some of the questions which we will be covering, and inshallah, the objective of this session is going to be to help us, get there. So now to break down further, one of the main objective is to understand our role, as a Muslim parent in shaping the brain. Yes, you heard it right. We play a very, very important role in shaping the structure of the brain.
Yo, come on.
Just let that sink in. It's not that the child is born and we just helping feeding them and changing their diapers and protecting them from the heat and the cold, and by clothing them appropriately. So no, subhanallah, we are shaping the brain of the child. So let that sink in. To understand how we're shaping the brain, I want us to understand the basic structure of the brain. We will discuss the concept of neuroplasticity. We'll discuss pruning. So these are some fundamental concepts which I want to cover in this today's session. Also, I want to go ahead and cover the basic parts of the brain structure and the function. So we know, what the brain does and what its role is, and the important thing I want all of us to remember as we're going through is that brain is not something which is inside us. It is connected to
Come
the
on, yeah.
parents, the caregivers, to the outside universe and the environment. And as Sister Faida mentioned in her introduction, it's all interconnected. Okay. After that, we go on to age-wise details, what happens within that particular age. And I've divided into 4 ages, as you can see on the screen: ages 0 to 3, 3 to 7, 7 to 12, and then adolescence to adults up to 25 years old. And in each, we will see what exactly brain development is going on, and then the best practices, the do's and the don'ts. Okay. And yeah, just to begin with, feel free to say Subhanallah, because as we go through this journey, you're just going to be Subhanallah. The ayat of Quran are just going to you're going to understand them at another level. The hadith of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam are going to be coming out in different light. So Subhanallah, just feel free to get into that zone. And inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this session as a ibadah, as we are going in and seeing our signs within us. Okay. All right. One disclaimer or warning, or I want to kind of give before we start going in, and that's every one of us. We all have to know that there's nothing called perfect parenting. Okay. This is an empowerment session. It is not a self-judgment or a session in which you want to kind of start feeling guilty. No, that's not the goal. So please be, in case you're kind of going in that direction, protect yourself from going to that. Okay. So there's nothing called perfect parenting. So rather, what we can do is we can do Iqra first, right? That's exactly what we're going to get into. Secondly, we want to grow and heal ourselves and kind of make us capable of doing this humongous responsibility of parenting, in the best possible way. And thirdly, subhanallah, as I was going through this preparation of this, as I've been learning myself more, I found many places where where I did damage, where I did wrong, where I did not do the right thing. So you're going to see many of those. But remember, our role is to repair. And subhanallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has always, just as He's opened the doors of Tawbah at any time, at every time, exactly the same way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has opened the door of repair, and for repair in this relationship, for repair of your child's brain, a relationship with the child as well. So subhanallah, so please be very cognizant of this fact. There's nothing called perfect parenting. Rather, we are here to learn and empower ourselves, and there is tremendous opportunity for repair and growth of things which we probably don't know the best way. So again, just like Tawbah, the repair, the three things which we got to do. The first thing, we got to recognize what was wrong. Secondly, we got to take a deep breath, and we got to be kind to ourselves and forgive ourselves, not go into shame or guilt. And thirdly, we got to say that this was a mistake, and then we make a reconnection or a repair. Okay. So that is very important. This needs to be with us throughout our sessions, inshallah. Okay. So subhanallah, so basically from anxiety or from confusion, we want to go towards the direction of being empowered, being knowledgeable in this, and then grounded in science, which is nothing but Allah's, the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how He does things in this world. Okay. So again, I probably cannot emphasize enough how huge responsibility this parenting is. And thinking back myself, as a mom, I was very excited when I came to know that I was pregnant. But did I realize the gravity of this? No, I don't think so. I did. And then we get busy with getting the crib ready, and getting the diapers ready, and which kind of milk bottles are the best, our nutrition. Okay, yes, I know in our moms, they are always behind us, take care of your nutrition. So all that is definitely there, but not really to a point where, I mean, my God, I'm responsible for the for creating these structures in the brain, which we're going to look into now, and that really did not sink in, until when I started learning about this. Okay, so these are the questions I asked myself, and was I confident? Probably was ignorant and did not know that how huge a responsibility it was. So maybe in that I was maybe in bliss at that time. um, you know and but then later on, as a kid grows, and then you start having challenges, that's when you start feeling lost. You don't know what to do, you get frustrated, you lose it, right? So that's kind of what happens, right? So let's uh, and this is probably the experience of every parent, and that's fine, and let's go ahead and empower ourselves, inshallah. So again, just to kind of it's always good to zoom out all the way, and then let's kind of zoom into the into the neuron of the brain, right? So when we zoom out, the whole universe and the whole the kainat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the human being in it, right? And the role of the human being is Khalifatul Ard, right? That is the objective of human being. And in the FIT course, we do it. We have the ruh, we have the body, right? We have the mind, and we, the ruh basically is coming into the mom's womb, right? And there is a mission on the planet Earth. And the body is a huge, immense tool which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given for for us to be able to perform the mission. So that's how we're going to look at our brain. Now, the the ayat, no, so the hadith from Sahih Bukhari, which states that no child is born upon the fitra, so no child is born except upon the fitra, and then it's his parents who make him either a Jew or a Christian or a fire worshipper, right? So subhanallah, this is a hadith by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this kind of sheds light into what we just been talking about, that the role of a parent in defining not only what he becomes externally, right, like what practices he does as a Jew or a Christian, but into this trickles down deep into the brain structures as well, right? So again, just let this sink in. Our role as parents is huge. Parents, can also be any caregivers, the primary caregiver who's taking care of the kid. And the important thing to remember here is, there are certain animals who take care of the kids or the babies as a group, and that's called alloparenting. We are, one of them. Elephants, there's under creation of Allah subhanahu, which does alloparenting, and alloparenting is very, very important. Again, bringing in the just like the entire universe is interconnected, so are the entire community is playing a very, very important role as well to again bring in the connectivity inside the brain cells. We're going to see. So we're going to be talking about the word connection, integration, subhanallah, all through this section of especially learning the brain structure. So important for the again, the parents and the community is huge. The roles of the masajids is huge in forming the kids' brain structure. Okay. Now, so we are just not a bystander. We are the architect. The parents, the external community, we are all the architect of their brain's mind. Okay. And again, we do not want to get overwhelmed by this responsibility. Rather, we want to learn about it. We want to be able to, have, the action tools. And in case anything goes wrong, we want to always repair it and come back. Okay. So that's the attitude which we want to go in with it. Okay. Now let's go ahead. Now from the expanse of the universe, the Earth, and now we come down into the brain. So this image which you see on this slide is this is a neuron, right? If you can see my cursor, this is a neuron, and then this has a lot of extensions or protrusions, you want to call it, called the dendrites. Okay, so this is a neuron cells, and these are a lot of small cells around supporting cells called the glial cells. So this is the microscopic image of a neuron. Okay, alrighty. Now let's go on to the next slide. All of the screens are visible, right? I'm audible as well.
All
Okay.
good.
Okay. Okay. All right. So now let's do a quiz. Okay. So I will ask all of you to type it in the chat. So how many neurons do you think the human brain contains? Is it 1 billion? It is 86 billion, 1 trillion, 500 million? Just go ahead and give me a guess. It's just to kind of
Maybe
so that this will sink in. Yeah. Give you a few more seconds. Please go ahead. Yes. Please chat in. And again, this is not a test or exam. This is just to kind of get us engaged in the session. Yeah. Go ahead. You want to please chat in. Put in the chat any number A, B, C, or D.
So we're getting billions and millions, and we're getting lots of responses.
A lot of responses. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. So it's it's huge. That's the one thing which we come from this. So Subhana, the number of the neurons which based on the science is around 86 billion neurons. Close to 100 billion neurons is the number of neurons that in each single cell we saw in the previous slide. So those we have these 86 billion neurons, 86, 90 neurons in the brain of a child. Okay. And this is more than, just to give context, this is more than the stars visible in the Milky Way. So these are all individual cells, sitting in the brain of the child, when they come in. The most of the brain cells in the front part are already there, in the back part of the brain, which is the cerebellum, actually once the child goes in the first 0 to 1 or 2 years, the cerebellar neurons, actually some of them start developing as well. But the total neurons, in the brain is around 90 billion neurons, okay? And so every time, and the activity which is happening inside these neurons is of two kinds, or the energy types which you see in these neurons. One is electrical energy is there, and then there's also the chemical, there's chemical reactions taking place as well. Okay, so these are the two main ways how this is happening. So anytime, basically when you, hold your kid or talk to them, you can literally see them, they're lighting up, so subhanallah. Okay. Now we're going to look a little bit of a diagram of the brain cells. So a single brain cell is called a neuron. Okay, so this is the structure of the neuron on the left side, you can see, and this is kind of the main cell body. Okay, the central thing is the nucleus. It has a long protrusion, and that is called the axon. Okay, and then it has these teeny branches, which are called the dendrites. Okay, and these dendrites are kind of like if again, like the tree, the branches, coming out. But the purpose of these dendrites is they again go and make connection with the dendrites or the axons of the other neurons. In this picture, you can see very faintly the dendrites of the other neuron. So basically, when the kid is born, the central cell bodies, those are there, but the connections are the ones which are going to get formed, are going to get formed later on. Okay, and that is where we play a very important role. Okay. So, and the place where the connection is happening between one neuron and one branch of neuron, with the other, that's called a synapse. Okay, and subhanallah, again, this is kind of the way they communicate. They communicate information between the two, and they do it in forms of usually chemicals. Small chemicals are released, and the chemicals are released. There also are the electrolytes, with a charged sodium atom, potassium atom. Those are released, and so electrical activity and chemical activity goes on, changes the shape of these structures, and the messages is getting passed. Okay, it's very, very interesting. If you want to look into how these messages pass, the chemical level and at the electrical level, it is very, very interesting to see how this information is passed. Okay, and subhanallah. So and whenever when parent has any interaction with the kid, when the messages are getting passed between this individual set of neurons which the kid is born with. Okay, and also the chemicals, and some of the, you've probably heard these names of these neurotransmitters or neuromodulators, chemicals released like dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. These are kind of some of the common ones which you probably have heard. So both this electrical reaction as well as the chemical reaction. Okay, so that is a synapse. Okay, now let's see what is happening. Yeah, now, so and in the first 2 years of life, the amount of connections that are formed is 1 million synaptic connections per second. Okay, let that sink in.
Be to Allah, man.
So it's 1 million connections that are happening every second. Whatever you do, that neuron is getting excited, then the other neurons they're forming those, the connections. And every interaction is a construction event, and that's kind of where we are giving the experiences to the child, and that is causing these connections to form. So that is where our role actually comes in. Okay, whether the kid is, you're feeding the baby, you're caressing the baby, you're giving eye contact with the baby, you're hugging the baby. All of these are actually forming those, causing these connections to get formed. Okay. And the same thing, and if you're not doing this as well, then the ones which need to be formed are not formed, and it's the brain is getting formed in a way which is not optimal for its job on this earth. Okay, so that is the amount of connections which are getting formed. All right. Now this is kind of this is a subway train map of, I think it's New York, right, in 2019. And the reason I put it is just because of it's easy to understand the connections which are formed in the brain, with this subway track, the subway, subway tracks and subway routes. So imagine like every neuron is like a home, okay, in that New York City, and then a group of homes, is like a neighborhood in New York, and that's kind of like it's kind of particular region of the brain, having particular function. Okay, and then now as a child, so the child is born with these, these nodes for these homes, are there. They don't have those branches and those connections. Those are not fully grown yet. That's what is getting formed later on. As the child, is born, and it's interacting with the child, and so these interconnections are getting laid, between the kid heard a sound from the mom's voice, that their voice was very calm, so the emotional center of the brain was also fired. Now now they're going to be connecting. Those neurons are going to come together, synapse, and form those connections. So basically, this kind of connections are getting formed, and the things which is repeatedly happening that are going to form stronger connections. Okay, so basically, it's the entire wiring and interconnection again of these single neurons which is in the brain structures are happening in the early childhood, mainly in the 0 to 3rd year. And that's where we play the role. Okay. And what happens when these connections form? So here you see in this diagram, there's something called myelination, right? So just like in the New York subway station, they kind of put this underground tunnels or a covering around that to protect that, the tracks which are always being used. The same thing, that's exactly what the neuron does. The one neuron with the hearing is connecting with the calming neuron in the emotional center of the brain. Now they are going to connect, and then what happens is that the particular cells which will come and line up, which is shown in the red, they call it Schwann cells, and they come and wrap around, and like a plastic cover on the wires, electrical wires, similar to that, so that and speed, so that the speed goes up. So they, once they're covered, they are also protected. Plus, the speed also goes up very, very high by 100 times. The speed of this electrical signal which is passing from that neuron, which started here, and then just passes fast, super speed, 100 times. So that's called actually the myelination. Okay, so that is happening. So the more I think things happening, the more the kid is hearing the mom's voice. So then the kid now knows the mom's voice, and the calming response is coming along with the mom's voice. So it's passing, and that connection is getting formed very, very strong. So we actually are playing very, very important role in making these connections. Okay, that is kind of what our role is. All right. And the so the brain size, we always told most of the the brain, except brain cells, the neurons are already there. By birth, there's in the cerebellum, the behind part of the brain, they still form in the early first 2 or 3 years. But what is basically causing this brain size to grow in this first 1 year? 80% of the brain sizes of an adult is developed within this first 2 to 3 years of age. Is what is happening basically is these branches are coming out. Too many branches and too many connections are getting formed, and myelin is getting formed. So that is kind of what is causing the brain to double its size in the first 2 years, actually. Okay, so the connections, it's called synapses is going to increase. The supporting cells called the glial cells are getting increased. The branches, the dendrites are going to get increased, and then the myelin is going to get laid down as well. Okay, all right. And the reason I'm going to I'm doing a little bit detail is this is kind of important. When we talk about all what's happening, these basics need to be there. Okay. Then we have what is called as pruning. Pruning is basically, and so the synapse, so many connections, like innumerable connections are getting formed in the first 2 to 3 years of life. And what the brain does is then based on first is like open floodgates, let them form connections, and then later on, the ones which are reused again and again are getting formed this myelin sheath, and so then the brain will keep those and will take away some, and that's called pruning. Just like once in your garden, it grows too much, you kind of prune off some, right? So pruning takes place in early childhood, as well as it takes place in adolescence as well. So this is something you'll hear in adolescence as well. Okay. And again, that's a way of how the brain is kind of getting focused on what its environment and what it needs to do in its particular context, right? So pruning is important. Then, of course, saves the energy efficiency of the brain as well. Okay. Now, any questions thus far? Is anyone having any questions? Is this clear? Is this space good? Yeah, if anyone just wants to unmute it, give me a feedback quickly.
Any questions? It seems good, Sister Farah. Following it so far, it's simple. Thank you.
Okay. So now you probably have heard this neuroplasticity, quite a bit recently. It's a new term. See, all the science of the brain is very recent. Okay, it's all started in 1990s. Okay, and because of the ability to do the SPECT imaging, the more ways how to look, which are lighting up, which neurons where. So because of that, now we're getting to know a lot of a lot of this is coming out. So neuroplasticity is again the it's again subhanallah, again here we have to really Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kind of wants us to give the opportunity to change at any time, and that is neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is basically the brain's way of saying, tell me what you want to change, and I can do it. You make the command, you decide with your choice and tell me, and I will do it. That is exactly what the brain is. Just kind of like a genie to the rule or the consciousness in you, and the choice maker in you. So you look at the picture right here. So neuroplasticity basically means, as we already talked about, if the connection of the sound and how it makes it feel, or any two parts of the brain which are relating with that particular event, the connection gets formed. You do again and again and again and again and again. It kind of it will form the myelin sheaths around. Messi, he looks at the ball where it's coming from. His feet will turn that particular direction, right? Or his head will, if he's a shooter, his head will jump in that direction. So those, the muscles which control the nerves, which control the muscles, his eye, the vision area, all that are going to get connected, and that's why it happens at split seconds, right? So that's kind of the neuroplasticity. But again, if you don't, so if you don't use this now for a long time, if you stop playing, you're going to lose it a little bit. And also, if you start doing something else, now the brain can start forming that. We can form start forming those pathways as well. So neuroplasticity means it can always change at any age. Whether you're 90, 100, can change, but the rate of change definitely is different. It's brain is very, very plastic in early years. And subhanallah, for me, neuroplasticity is nothing but it's evidence. I mean, it's a scientific evidence of of Rahman Rahim, the Rahma of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, right? Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is giving this open opportunity for everyone to change anytime, and Allah loves those who constantly repent. In this ayah, and constantly, because Allah knows that when your already tracks are laid in a particular way, just that impulse will come, you end up doing that same sin or the wrong thing. But you keep, and that's why Allah says, no problem, you can go and repent, because Allah knows that this is how the structure is. Of course, He's the one who made it. And He knows that if you keep going back again and again, that this will become weak, and then the right action will become stronger. So you just, subhanAllah, you start seeing the ayats of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala at a more deeper level, subhanallah. Yeah. Okay. So again, just about neuroplasticity, but the peak plasticity, I mean, is of course in 0 to 3 years. You can change any time, but the most time you can change things, or you can set the right foundation tracks or the right subway tracks, as we saw that it's in childhood, and that is where the role of the parents and the environment around it comes. Okay, so that is very, very important. So that's why it is. There's also critical and sensitive bits. So certain brain functions, like the ability to develop language, vision, the emotional regulation, that also there are certain periods, that is the early years, 0 to 3. That's when maybe up to 5 language or so, but that's when these you can lay those tracks. If you don't lay the tracks, you lose the opportunity. Okay, again, that makes it very, very, very critical for us to be conscious of what we are doing as parents. Okay, the second wave again comes in adolescence, right? And again, adolescence, subhanallah. So at that time, the adolescent is figuring out who he is. He's now deciding who he wants to be, and then he's also be able to go and lay those tracks at that. Allah Subhanahu again gives an opportunity for him to decide. It's not that the parents decide and that's done. No. You got another opportunity coming in the period of adolescence, when he gets to decide. We call them teens, but subhanAllah, this is a period where they get to decide whom they want to be. Now the front part of the brain is having has all the myelin and thinking and connected. They are able to decide that for themselves, and they get to decide who they want to be, and now they can also have the opportunity of laying their tracks. So it's very plastic at that time as well in adolescence. But again, it's a lifelong. It's Allah's rahmah, subhanAllah. At any time it can happen. Anytime. Okay. Yes. Next, I want to just go to this quick, hand model of the brain. Subhanallah, such a simple model. Dr. Dan Siegel, he's done a lot of work in this early childhood and the attachment, and he integrates all the neurobiology, psychiatry, neurochemistry, along with parenting, role of the environment. So he's done a very good integrated and a wholesome work. I like his work. And he has, just for the people to understand, he's kind of, suggested what's called the hand-brain model. Many of you probably have heard that. So if you take up your, hand, and this is the brain stem, the lowermost part of the brain, okay. And if you kind of bend your thumb into the middle, that's it's called the limbic part of the brain. That's the emotional part of the brain. And then this one, your fingers, now you kind of cover your emotional part of the brain, and that's the outer lobe is the cortical area of the brain. Okay, and the frontmost is the just behind here. There's a it's called a prefrontal cortex. Okay, so this is kind of the simple structure of the brain. And the brain stem, it starts forming way early, when the kid is in the womb of the mom. Okay, and then the limbic system is formed again in the early childhood, and up to 12 years, this is formed and this is formed, these two are formed. So this one it gets formed from 12 years on to up to 25. What do you mean by one form? Because I already told you, right, the brain, the neuron cells are there, so that is there. That's true. The cells of neurons are there, but the interconnections and the myelin and all of that laying is happening later on in 12 age 12, right? So that is kind of the what I mean by getting formed. All right, so this is important to remember, and we'll come back to how now for the brain to function, everything has to be coordinated. So just remember again, the connections have to be there for everything for you to be functioning in the right way. Okay, I'll go quickly over the functions of of these three parts, so you'll know what the role. So the brain stem is mainly for the autopilot things what our body needs. For example, it needs to be taking breaths. The body, so it's like the body is a is a tool which Allah Subhanahu wa Taala wants to keep you alive until your time is here, right? And the body will do lot of things are done automatically, and those the brainstem does. Some of the important ones are breathing, right? You take a breath with a note or not. You can override and take deep breaths or hold your breath. You can do that, but it happens with your heartbeat, right? So subhanallah. So these are again a lot of things are happening inside the immune system, the regulation, maintaining of the temperature. I mean, you name it. There's so much happening without your knowing, right? The sleep cycle, then, and also when there's any danger comes, running away from it or fighting against it to protect yourself, or acting as if you're frozen up, right, like an opossum, right? All those things are reflex. You have your consciousness does not have any input in that, right? So those are all from the brain stem, and that's kind of formed way in the womb of a mom, and at birth this part is very, very strong. Then you have the limbic system, and the limbic system is kind of the big one, and the limbic system is mainly the emotions and the chemicals related with emotions, memories. There's memory centers here. Those are the limbic system, which play a very, very important role in the early childhood as well. And this, as we mentioned, is coming at 12. And this once this gets connected with everything, this will take on the role of a boss in the deciding, the impulse control, the thinking, problem solving. All of those are actually functions that start later on. They start developing around 12 years old. So that's why a little kid, cannot control he can't control. If you explain to the kid, you should, like a 2-year-old or maybe even a 5-year-old, that you should not be crying because this is not the right thing to do. It doesn't help you. It's not going to get all that logic at this point. Okay, it's it just feels scared, and the kid is going to cry, right? So the ability to control, think, all the executive functions, cognitive functions, the decision making, all of that actually will start in the prefrontal, in this area, and this area gets developed with all that myelin and all the branches and synapses later on, by 12 up to 25, and hence Allah Subhanahu wa Taala does not punish these kids even if they do wrong before the age they develop this. And actually, and Allah Subhanahu wa Taala actually catches. He questions this area of the brain, right, as when he takes accountability as well. So those are some of the connections with our hadiths and with the Quran. All right, so this is important, and again here I have to talk about integration or connection. It's very, very important for these neurons to form with connection. These neurons to form connection. These neurons, they have to be all well connected to be functioning well later on. And these connections, interconnections, start getting laid way early, 0 to 3 years. And we will discuss that later. Okay, so this was the hand model we discussed about. A couple more things about, so we can discuss these two parts. That's the limbic or the emotional, the brain, and the brainstem as a downstairs brain. And the main role of this downstairs brain is kind of survival, right? Survival in this world is kind of, be in the world until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wants it to be. That's kind of the main role of this part of the this part of the brain. And then the upstairs is kind of the root part. When the consciousness comes in, that is engaging with the upper part, and making all the decisions and all of that. Okay, so you can just simple, if you want to divide the brain, upper brain and upstairs and downstairs brain. And this is important because for controlling your emotions, you have to have the upper brain override, or not override, but control or suggest what's the right thing to this the big part. Okay, if that connection is gone, you'll find yourself in what's called the reactive phase. Your kid did not do your homework and you're yelling at him. That is a reactive phase, because even and that happens very fast because there's no connection. If you are having good connection and if you are conscious of it, then you would think, why is he not doing, what could be possible reasons, what's a better strategy. All that would be engaging your upstairs. So that's kind of the important between those connections, are very important to regulate ourselves. You can be in a reactive if there's no connection, or you can be in a receptive, flexible, adaptable, in the strategic thinking to kind of figure out. That will be when you are having a good connection. The other one more aspect of the brain structure I was wanting to just kind of know this right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. So the right side of the brain plays a very, very important role in the early childhood, and the right side of the brain is able to get the wholesome picture. It's the zoomed out picture, and the wholesome picture is able to be got by the right. And it does not just depend on words, but it can pick up all those subtle cues from the mom's face, whether it is her tone in the voice, probably even her, the vibrations, probably her, the how her appearance of the eyes, or whether she's frowning or she's happy, she's sad, then the facial muscles, all that actually is done by the right hemisphere. And this, so right hemisphere is very, very active in the very early years. Okay, so that is something. Okay, so I think that's pretty much about the brain structure which I want to talk about. Now I think we can move on to the yes. Okay. Any questions thus far?
Just Farhana, there's a question there from Brother Zulkarnain about why shouting back at a screaming child, neurological feature.
Yeah, we will come to that. We will come to why it is. We'll come to that. Yeah.
Okay. And Sister Tawana, keep an eye on the time. I don't know whether you want to partition this talk off and how you want to go, because we are,
This chemical and electrical signals.
it's we're coming to the hour now, so
Somehow.
How much more minutes do you want me to go, Sis Faida? Do you
Somehow
want me to?
could be.
I just try to start wrapping it up. It's at a good point as soon as possible. Then we can have the next
Okay.
yeah.
Perfect.
Physical.
Okay, so I think today basically I think we covered the structure of the brain and how the all the myelin is laid, the connections are made, all of that. So I think with that background now it becomes very easy for us to understand what you're going to talk about. So I'm just going to introduce you the developmental stages quickly, and then we will pause, and then inshallah the next session we will do the 0 to 3 years, the more details about that. Okay. So yeah. So Subhanallah, Ali radiallahu anhu, he described 3 phases of raising a child, 7-7-7 model. And subhanAllah, the psychologists, they use the 7-7 model even now. So the play for 7 years, teach them. The kid is in the learning and the receptive for teaching in the 7 years, and then you become friends in the next 7 years, right? So 0 to 7, 7 to 14, and then 14 to adulthood, you are a friend, right? So this is kind of a wisdom which is right on, and this is the 7-7-7 model used by the psychologist. Okay, all right. So so in the first, you basically you really don't want to kind of hinder that growth and just give a positive environment in a nutshell. That's kind of what you want to do in the phase 1. You want to meet their needs. Okay. And the phase two, more of mentoring, teaching, guiding, the front, like self-control, impulse, all the start getting developed, at this point. And then by phase three, all of this has developed. Now they want more of a guidance, mentor, and stuff like that. Okay. Let me see. Yes, and the important thing about the brain kind of has this kind of stages. It goes in stages. In 0 3, the most important is that here the parents probably play the most important role. Okay. And every time you look at the kid and smile, you hug, you feed, soothe the baby when it's crying. All this is forming those connections between the various parts of the brain, and which is essential for the kid later on, whether it's for regulation, whether it's for having high self-esteem, for all of those. Okay. Then we have 3 to 7, where the prefrontal cortex starts, the front part starts developing, but mainly the movement and play, it helps the brain develop. By 7 to 14 years, you can start teaching the kid values, exposing to the various subjects of the world. And then by 14 to 25, they come in their adolescence, they form the identity, they decide whom they want to be. So by then, they should know who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, they should know who Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is, they should know what the message of Quran is, what the world is about, what they're supposed to do here, and then they kind of move it forward from there on. Okay. So that is, it happens in stages. We will go through that. Okay. So I think I'm going to, I'm going to operate here, because now this is, we're going to enter into this, we're going to enter into this next age. Okay. Any questions this far? So I know the brother asked a question regarding, I can just briefly explain that. So basically, remember the two, you can either be receptive, flexible, adaptable, come up with the right solution. That's when you are, when there's a good connection, and when your front part is thinking, that's when you can do that, right? But if you get triggered, and that moment of a trigger where something reminds you of something in the childhood which has a negative emotion associated with that, then you could, if your regulation control is not good, you could lose that, the connection at that time, and then you can go based on what reaction, what emotion is triggered, whether it's fear or whatever. You can either get angry and fight it out, or you can run away from that, just avoid and go away from that, without dealing with the issue. So you could do that, and that becomes a reactive thing. So that's kind of what is basically happening. And this can be, we can train ourselves to become more regulated and more conscious. So and that's very, very important. And in kids, they are going to be reactive. They are. So the fact that we can expect the kid, I'm explaining the kid so much, and they are not understanding. If you tell that about a 5-6-year-old kid, that's just, we don't know them. We don't know how the brain is. That's what it is. You can't. So what you do is so the kid basically borrows your regulation at that time. So you have to be calm in that situation, and at the same time you have to make sure that the kid is felt safe. You can talk to them about the emotion, what they're feeling, and say, yeah, that's, we understand what you're feeling. Name the emotion. Apparently, when you name the emotion, they've calmed down. The part of the brain starts releasing some calming chemicals. So you name the emotion, you stay with them in that place without us becoming like them. So that's kind of the biggest thing we have to train ourselves to. It is difficult. Trust me, as parent, it will happen. And if at all that happens, if at all kind of, you're too busy, or you had something else on your head, you were worried or stressed and it happened, then we have to, make sure, as I said, repair. We have to do the repair. First of all, we have to try to make ourselves not be in those moments that often. But secondly, we have to, if we need to walk away, we need to walk away at that point if it's too bad. But later on, we have to come and repair. And repair is first recognizing. Again, it's same as Baba. We have recognized what we did was wrong. Be kind to ourselves, not go into the guilt or shame for ourselves, but be kind. and then explain to kid, that that is a mistake and that is not right, and you're safe and I love you, so you got to kind of make that up as a repair. So that is a little bit of explanation of that, because that's a very, very important thing. And trust me, every one of us has those moments where we lose those connections. So um, um, please do not go into that guilt or shame and avoidant this thing. Rather, face it on, accept it, and make it better. Yeah, I hope that answers this question. Anything else? Any other questions based on what we'll cover? Most, some of it will come back actually again. But yeah.
There's a question on diet, Sister Vanna. Does diet affect the brain development?
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. So breast milk, the omega-3. We have Sister Safia Gopalani. She's a nutritionist and she's done a lot of work, and on nutrition and in pregnancy and before, in pregnancy and early childhood. So we will forward those. We can put those maybe sessions on the BOTP. Sister Safia's on nutrition, the early childhood and the pregnancy. So yes, it plays a very, very important role. Yeah, nutrition plays an important role. Yeah.
Any other questions? We got a survey out there. So please do answer the survey. We get Sister Vanna will also get to know if you have any particular areas you have concerns on. You can write them in the survey, and she'll inshallah cover it in the upcoming series. So please do the survey and do write your questions in the chat, or speak up.
Yep. So if my audience can just type in one takeaway or something which stuck with them in the chat, it'll be appreciated.
They're gonna react. That's a good
No, I
thing.
think Sister Vanna, you're talking about the later part. It develops with the hand model. This develops later, right? So when it's developed, well, how come the adult is reacting when it's developed?
So the connections start laying very early, 0 to 3. That is why when we see based on the attachment theory, the work done by Dr. Dan Siegel, the moms, they satisfy